September 17th, 1943. The kitchen was silent except for the sound of a wooden spoon scraping against copper. Marie Fournier stood at the stove, her hands trembling as she stirred. The smell of butter and herbs filled the air: rosemary, thyme, garlic. Normal smells, comforting smells, the kind that should have made her think of home, of family dinners, of life before the occupation. But tonight, those smells made her stomach turn. Because tonight, Marie was cooking for a monster. And hidden in the sauce, dissolved where no one could see it, was something that didn't belong. Something that would either free her village or get her killed before dawn. She'd been preparing this meal for 3 hours. Every ingredient measured precisely. Every step followed exactly. The recipe had been passed down through 3 generations of her family. A secret technique, a culinary masterpiece that had once been served to French nobility. But Marie had changed it. One ingredient. Just one. A substitution so subtle that no one would notice until it was too late. Her hand hovered over the pot. The moment of no return. She could still stop. Could still dump the sauce and claim it had burned. Could still choose to live with fear instead of dying with courage. The front door slammed. Heavy boots on the wooden floor. German voices, laughing. He was here. Oberst Friedrich von Manstein. The commandant. The butcher of Reims. The man who had turned her village into a prison and her people into ghosts. Marie closed her eyes, said a prayer she wasn't sure anyone was listening to, and poured the sauce over the roasted duck. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that her poisoned recipe would do something far stranger than kill a German officer. It would expose a secret that would shake the entire occupation command. And it would all start with a meal that tasted absolutely perfect. Marie Fournier was 34 years old and had spent half her life in kitchens. She'd learned to cook from her grandmother, who'd learned from her grandmother, who'd learned from a chef who once worked in the Palace of Versailles. The Fournier family recipes were legendary in the region, complex, precise, requiring instincts that couldn't be taught, only inherited. Before the war, Marie had run a small restaurant in Reims. Nothing fancy, just good French cooking, the kind that made locals come back twice a week and tourists write about it in their travel journals. She'd been happy, successful, building something with her own hands. Then the Germans came. May 1940. The invasion swept through France like a plague. Within weeks, the country had fallen. Within months, the occupation had settled into a grinding routine of fear and submission. Reims became a garrison town. German soldiers everywhere. Officers requisitioning the best houses, the best wine, the best of everything while the French went hungry. Marie's restaurant was seized, converted into an officer's mess. And Marie herself was given a choice: cook for the occupiers or be sent to a work camp. Some choices aren't really choices at all. For 3 years, Marie had cooked for them. German officers sitting at tables that had once hosted French families. Eating food prepared with ingredients requisitioned from farms that could barely feed their own children. Laughing and drinking while the village starved. And the worst of them, the absolute worst, was Oberst Friedrich von Manstein. He'd arrived in Reims 6 months ago, taking command of the garrison. A tall man, broad-shouldered, with pale blue eyes that looked through people rather than at them. He spoke French fluently, which somehow made him more frightening. He knew exactly what he was saying when he issued orders. Knew exactly what fear looked like on French faces. Von Manstein was efficient, ruthless. When the resistance sabotaged a German supply truck, he hanged 3 villagers in the town square as a warning. When someone painted anti-German slogans on the church wall, he burned down 2 houses. The message was clear: step out of line, and everyone pays. Marie had cooked for him dozens of times. Always the same routine. He would arrive at 8 o'clock precisely, would inspect the dining room like he was inspecting troops, would sit alone at the head table while his adjutants ate at smaller tables nearby. And he would expect perfection. Von Manstein considered himself a connoisseur. He knew wine, knew food, could identify herbs and techniques with disturbing accuracy. He'd once sent back a dish because the cream had been heated 2 degrees too high. Another time, he'd complimented Marie on her use of tarragon, noting that most cooks used too much. He treated cooking like warfare. Precision, control, dominance. And Marie hated him with a hatred that burned in her chest like swallowed fire. But hatred alone doesn't change anything. Hatred is just an emotion, useless without action. The action came from an unexpected source. His name was Laurent. He was 19 years old. He'd been Marie's sous chef before the war, a talented kid with quick hands and a good palate. When the occupation started, Laurent had joined the resistance. Small acts at first, passing messages, hiding supplies, nothing dramatic, until the Gestapo caught him. They didn't kill him immediately. Instead, they interrogated him, tortured him, tried to make him give up names of other resistance members. Laurent didn't break, didn't give them anything. So von Manstein made an example of him. Public execution, in the town square, at noon, when everyone would be forced to watch. Marie had been there, had stood with the other villagers, made to witness, made to understand what happened to those who resisted. She'd watched Laurent die, watched the light leave his eyes, watched his mother collapse, screaming, and something inside Marie had broken. Not broken like shattered, broken like a dam. All the rage and grief and helplessness she'd been holding back for 3 years came flooding out. She couldn't fight the Germans with guns, couldn't sabotage their vehicles or blow up their ammunition. She was just a cook. But maybe that was enough. The idea came to her that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. Von Manstein trusted her cooking, trusted that she was too afraid, too compliant, too broken to ever do anything against him. That trust was a weapon, and Marie knew exactly how to use it. The next morning, she went to see Father Michel at the church. The old priest was one of the few people in the village who still seemed unafraid. Not because he was brave, but because he'd lived long enough to know that fear changes nothing. "I need to confess something," Marie said quietly, kneeling in the empty church. "I'm listening, my child. I'm going to kill someone." Father Michel was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Are you asking for permission or forgiveness?" "I don't know. Tell me what you're planning." Marie told him. About von Manstein. About Laurent. About the recipe she'd been perfecting in her mind. A dish so complex, so perfectly crafted, that no one would suspect anything was wrong until it was too late. "What will you use?" Father Michel asked. "Poison." "No. Something else. Something that won't kill him, but will destroy him just the same." She explained. The priest listened. And when she finished, he was quiet for a very long time. "This is dangerous," he said finally. "If they discover what you've done, they'll kill me. I know. But they're killing us anyway. Slowly. One humiliation at a time. One execution at a time. At least this way, I'm fighting back." Father Michel placed his hand on her head. "Then may God protect you, Marie. And may your aim be true." The key ingredient arrived 3 days later. It came hidden in a shipment of vegetables from a farm outside the city. A farm run by a man named Jacques who had connections to the resistance. Inside a hollowed-out cabbage, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small glass vial. Marie held it up to the light, studying the clear liquid inside. Not poison. Something far more interesting. It was a chemical compound, something the resistance had acquired from a sympathetic chemist. Colorless, tasteless, completely undetectable when mixed with food. And it had one very specific effect. It would make whoever consumed it violently, catastrophically ill. Not enough to kill, but enough to incapacitate completely. Enough to require immediate medical attention. That was the plan. Make von Manstein sick. Get him to a hospital. And in his delirium, in his weakened state, he would say things. Reveal things. Because Marie had learned something about the Oberst. Something whispered in the kitchen by a German soldier who'd had too much wine. Something that, if proven true, could end his reign completely. Von Manstein was stealing. Not just supplies. Not just rations. But gold. Valuables. Art. Everything of value that passed through Reims, the Oberst was skimming a percentage. Hiding it. Building his own private fortune while telling Berlin that the locals had nothing left to give. It was the oldest story in occupation. Officers getting rich off the suffering of others. But the SS didn't tolerate theft. Not from their own. If von Manstein's corruption could be exposed, if he could be caught with evidence, or if he confessed while delirious, the SS would remove him themselves. And the village would be free of him without a single shot being fired. That was the real plan. Not murder. Exposure. Marie just needed to get him sick enough to talk. She spent the next week perfecting the dish. It had to be complex enough to mask any unusual ingredients. Had to be something von Manstein would want to eat. Had to be absolutely perfect in every other way, so that no one would suspect anything was wrong. She settled on canard à la Rouen-oise, duck and blood sauce, a classic French dish, but incredibly difficult to execute properly. The kind of thing that would appeal to von Manstein's pretensions. The recipe was a family secret, passed down through generations. The technique involved suffocating the duck rather than bleeding it, so the blood stayed in the meat. Then the carcass was pressed to extract the blood, which was mixed with the duck's liver, butter, cognac, and reduced into a sauce that was simultaneously rich, complex, and utterly unique. It was exactly the kind of culinary masterpiece that would make von Manstein feel superior, would make him believe that even in war, even in occupation, the French still served him like a king. And hidden in that sauce, dissolved where no one could detect it, would be the chemical compound. Marie practiced the dish 3 times with normal ingredients, making sure every element was perfect. The other cooks in the kitchen watched her work with confusion. Why was she putting so much effort into a meal for the Germans? She told them it was professional pride, that even if she was cooking for monsters, she wouldn't compromise her standards. They believed her because they wanted to. Because the alternative, that Marie was planning something dangerous, was too frightening to consider. On September 17th, von Manstein sent word that he would be dining at the restaurant that evening. A private meal. Just him and his adjutant, Hauptmann Becker. Marie's hands didn't shake when she received the message. Her voice didn't waver when she acknowledged it. She'd made her decision. There was no going back now. The day moved with agonizing slowness. Marie prepared every element of the meal with mechanical precision. The duck was butchered perfectly. The sauce ingredients were arranged in exact order. The compound was transferred from its vial to a small spice container, hidden among the dozens of others on her shelf. At 6 o'clock, she began cooking. The kitchen was hot, filled with steam and the smell of roasting meat. The other cooks worked around her, preparing side dishes and desserts. No one paid special attention to what Marie was doing. This was her domain, her recipe. No one questioned her. At 7:30, the duck went into the oven. At 7:50, Marie began the sauce. This was the moment, the point of no return. She pressed the duck carcass, extracting the blood, mixed it with the liver, the cognac, the butter, added the herbs, rosemary, thyme, a touch of garlic. And then, when no one was looking, she added 3 drops from the spice container. The compound dissolved instantly, completely invisible. The sauce looked exactly as it should, deep red-brown, glossy, perfect. Marie stirred it slowly, watching it reduce. Her heart was hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. But no one looked her way. No one suspected. At 8 o'clock precisely, the front door opened. Von Manstein had arrived. Marie plated the dish herself. Sliced duck breast, arranged artistically. The sauce poured over it in a glossy cascade. Roasted vegetables on the side. A sprig of fresh herbs for garnish. It looked like art. It looked like love made edible. It looked exactly like what it was, a masterpiece of French cooking. Marie watched through the kitchen door as the server carried it out. Watched von Manstein's face as the plate was set before him. He leaned forward, inhaling the aroma. Said something to Hauptmann Becker that made the younger officer laugh. Then he picked up his knife and fork. and began to eat. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. Von Manstein ate with obvious pleasure, complimented the dish, called Marie out from the kitchen to personally thank her. She stood before him, hands folded, eyes downcast. The perfect image of subservience. Exceptional, von Manstein said in his flawless French. Truly exceptional. This is why I tolerate you people, because occasionally, you create something worth having. Marie nodded, said nothing, retreated to the kitchen. Her hands were shaking now. The compound should be working, should be in his system, being absorbed, beginning its work. But von Manstein looked fine, was even having a second glass of wine. What if it didn't work? What if the chemical was inert? What if she'd risked everything for nothing? Marie forced herself to breathe, to wait, to trust. At 8:45, von Manstein stood up, started to say something to Becker, and swayed, just slightly, a momentary loss of balance. He gripped the edge of the table, frowned. Sir. Becker was on his feet immediately. Are you all right? Yes. Just dizzy for a moment. Von Manstein sat back down heavily. His face had gone pale. Perhaps I stood up too quickly. But 5 minutes later, he stood again. And this time, he had to grip the table with both hands. Sir, I think we should get you to the infirmary. I'm fine, von Manstein snapped. But his voice was strained. And when he took a step, his leg buckled. Becker caught him, called for help. 2 soldiers rushed in, supporting their commander. The hospital, Becker ordered. Now, they half-carried von Manstein out. Marie watched from the kitchen door, her heart pounding. It was working. The compound was working. But the real test would come later. When von Manstein was delirious. When his carefully maintained control slipped. When he started talking. The kitchen staff erupted in whispered speculation the moment the Germans left. Was it the food? Had the Oberst been poisoned? Would they all be arrested? Marie forced calm into her voice. It wasn't the food. I tasted everything before it was served. It was probably just his heart. These officers, they drink too much, eat too much. Their bodies can't handle it. The others wanted to believe her. So they did. But Marie couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her small room above the restaurant, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the knock on the door that would mean they'd figured it out. It never came. Instead, the next morning, something far stranger happened. The Germans sealed off the hospital. SS officers arrived from Paris. The Gestapo, important men in long coats and cold eyes. They cordoned off an entire wing of the building. Posted guards. Allowed no one in or out except authorized medical personnel. The village buzzed with rumors. Von Manstein was dead. Von Manstein was fine. Von Manstein had been poisoned by the resistance, and the SS was looking for whoever did it. Marie prepared for arrest, packed a small bag, said goodbye to the few possessions she owned. But no one came for her. Days passed. The hospital remained sealed. Von Manstein didn't return to the garrison. His second-in-command, a major named Klein, took over temporarily. And then, on the 4th day, Marie received an unexpected visitor. Father Michel came to the restaurant's back door just after dawn. His face was strange, not frightened, but shocked, disturbed. Marie, I need to speak with you. Privately. They went to her room. The priest closed the door carefully before speaking. I heard confession yesterday from a German soldier. He was troubled, needed to talk to someone. What did he say? He's a medic. Was assigned to help with von Manstein. Marie, the Oberst didn't die. He's not even that sick anymore. But something happened while he was delirious. What happened? Father Michel looked at her with something like awe. He talked. For hours. Said things he shouldn't have said. About the gold he's been stealing. About the accounts he's hidden. About officers in Paris he's been bribing. Marie's breath caught. Did anyone hear him? Everyone heard him. The doctors, the nurses, and someone, probably one of the officers, reported it directly to the SS. So they know? They know he's corrupt. They know more than that. Father Michel's voice dropped to a whisper. Von Manstein wasn't just stealing for himself. He was part of a network. Other officers, all across France, skimming from the occupation and hiding it. The SS is furious. They're launching a full investigation. Marie sat down slowly. Because of what he said while he was sick. Because of what he said while he thought he was dying. The medic said von Manstein was terrified. Thought the resistance had poisoned him. Thought he was going to die. So he started confessing. Trying to clear his conscience before the end. And instead, he cleared out a corruption network. Exactly. Marie started to laugh. Couldn't help it. The absurdity of it. She'd planned to expose one corrupt officer. Instead, she'd accidentally exposed dozens. What happens now? She asked when she could speak again. Von Manstein is being transported to Berlin. For interrogation. Trial. The others who were named are being arrested. The entire occupation command structure in northern France is being investigated. And me? Father Michel shook his head. No one suspects you. They think it was food poisoning, bad meat, or spoiled wine. Just an accident. An accident. Marie had planned for exposure, for confrontation, for death, possibly. She hadn't planned for success. Hadn't imagined that her poison recipe would work exactly as intended, but with consequences far beyond what she'd imagined. What was in the compound? Father Michel asked quietly. You never told me. I don't know exactly. Something the resistance acquired. It was supposed to make him sick enough to require medical attention. Sick enough to lose control. Well, it worked. He lost control of everything. Over the next 2 weeks, the purge spread like wildfire through the German command structure. Officers were arrested, court-martialed, executed. The corruption investigation consumed the occupation leadership's attention completely. And in that chaos, something unexpected happened. The pressure on the village eased. The executions stopped. The harsh reprisals disappeared. The new officers who arrived to replace those who'd been arrested were too busy covering their own backs to terrorize civilians. For the first time in 3 years, Reims could breathe. The resistance network noticed, adapted, used the chaos to move more freely, to rebuild, to prepare for the liberation they knew was coming. And Marie? Marie went back to cooking. She served the new German officers with the same outward compliance she'd shown von Manstein. But now, when she cooked, she smiled. Because she knew something they didn't. She knew that food could be more than sustenance, more than pleasure. It could be a weapon, a tool, a way to fight back against those who thought themselves invincible. All it took was the right recipe. Oberst Friedrich von Manstein was executed by firing squad in Berlin on November 3, 1943. The official charge was corruption and theft of Reich property. The unofficial reason was that he'd embarrassed the SS by getting caught. By talking. By revealing a network of corruption that made the occupation look disorganized and corrupt. The SS didn't tolerate embarrassment. Von Manstein's last words, according to the official report, were, I was just doing what everyone else was doing. He was probably right. But that didn't save him. 14 other officers were arrested in the wake of von Manstein's delirious confession. 8 were executed. 6 were reassigned to the Eastern Front. Essentially a death sentence of a different kind. The entire occupation command structure in northern France was overhauled. New officers, new rules, new oversight, and the resistance gained 6 months of relative freedom to organize, recruit, and prepare for the liberation that was coming. Historians would later estimate that the disruption to German command in the region contributed to the success of the D-Day landings and the subsequent liberation of France. Not in any direct way, but in the chaos it created, the distraction it provided, the weakness it revealed. All of it traced back to a single meal, a single dish, a single cook who decided that fear was no longer enough reason to stay silent. Marie never told anyone the full truth of what she'd done. The compound had come from the resistance, yes, but the plan had been hers alone. The execution had been her courage. She carried that secret for the rest of her life. When the Allies liberated Reims in August 1944, Marie was there in the crowd, watching the American tanks roll through the streets. watching the Germans surrender, watching her village become free. People celebrated, cried, embraced soldiers they didn't know. Marie just stood quietly, remembering Laurent, remembering the day she decided that cooking could be resistance too. After the war, she reopened her restaurant. It became successful again, more successful than before. People came from across France to taste the legendary Fournier family recipes. But Marie never made canard à la Rouen-wise again. Some recipes, she decided, were meant to be used only once. She lived to be 83 years old, trained dozens of young cooks, passed down her knowledge, her techniques, her passion for food done right. And she never told any of them about the night she'd poisoned a German officer with a perfect meal. In 1985, a historian researching the occupation of Reims discovered a curious notation in German records. A medical report from September 1943 describing a case of severe food poisoning that had affected Oberst von Manstein. The historian tried to track down more information, tried to find out what had really happened that night. But the cook who'd prepared the meal had died 2 years earlier. The restaurant had closed, and anyone who might have known the truth had either died or forgotten. The historian noted the incident in his book. A footnote, a curiosity, nothing more. He never knew how close he'd come to uncovering one of the most successful acts of resistance in the entire occupation. Today, if you visit Reims, you can still see the building where Marie's restaurant once stood. It's a cafe now, serving tourists and locals. The menu is different. The recipes are modern, but on the wall, there's a small plaque. It lists the names of local heroes of the resistance, saboteurs and spies and soldiers who fought to free France. Marie Fournier's name isn't on that plaque, because officially, she wasn't resistance. She was just a cook who fed the occupiers and kept her head down. But in the kitchen of that cafe, if you talk to the older cooks, they'll tell you stories about the legendary Fournier family recipes, about techniques so precise they bordered on magic. And sometimes, late at night, when the restaurant is closed and the kitchen is quiet, they'll talk about something else. About a rumor, a legend, a story that might not be true but feels true. About a cook who served a perfect meal to a German officer. A meal so good that he lost control. A meal that tasted like heaven but carried the weight of justice. They don't know if it's true, but they want it to be. Because sometimes, the best resistance isn't loud, isn't violent, isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, a weapon disguised as an act of service. Sometimes it's a cook who decides that enough is enough. Sometimes it's a recipe that changes everything. She was just a cook who made a meal. But in that meal, she served something more than food. She served justice, disguised as perfection. And sometimes, the most dangerous weapon is the one no one sees coming. Hidden in plain sight, wrapped in rosemary and thyme, delivered with a smile that carries the weight of resistance. The knife was always there, in the kitchen, where it belonged.